Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska, and this is the news. Law and Justice President Jarosław Kaczyński has announced that a referendum should be held on the relocation of migrants. Yesterday, the Polish Sejm passed a resolution opposing the EU's forced relocation mechanism. For not accepting migrants, there is to be a financial penalty of 20,000 euros per person whose entry into the country has been denied. According to the opposition, the referendum announcement is a manifestation of Law and Justice's anti-immigration policy. This is a lie. There will be no forced relocation. It seems to me that the point is that in this pact it said about 20,000 euros for each migrant. For Poland, that's 30 million euros a year. How does that compare to the 600 million penalty for the muzzling law? That's not much. According to a regulation adopted in early June, a member state must accept an agreed number of migrants or pay a financial penalty for any failure to allow them to enter the country. Poland and Hungary were against it. There is no doubt that the decision of the nation will be decisive in this matter. I cannot imagine that the EU could commit a country to an idea that would go against the will of the people. The parliamentary resolution expressing opposition to the EU's relocation mechanism for illegal migrants stressed that European solidarity cannot take the form of blackmail. For failure to carry out each relocation, the country in question will pay at least 20,000 euros. We, as the left, have applied for 500 euros per refugee. Unfortunately, Polish diplomacy is asleep and even opposed to provisions that could benefit Poland. According to Law and Justice deputies, the new rules are a dictate that will result in a cultural transformation in Europe. This is an incomprehensible approach. We already have our experience. We know how the EU should open up to people from outside the community. As you can see, Angela Merkel's Willkommen doctrine is up to date. Most migrants and asylum seekers reach the EU via Greece and the Balkan countries. Relocation to Poland each year would take 30,000 migrants. However, their number could increase. The draft asylum law also provides for situations in which mandatory solidarity in a given year would not be binding. Hence my prediction that these relocations, even voluntary ones, will again end with migrants fleeing to the country from which they were moved. The only problem is that the responsibility for such a migrant, the new regulation, shifts to the country to which he or she is relocated. The new European Union rules are an attempt to solve the migrant crisis that began in 2015. At the time, nearly 2 million people tried to illegally cross the border into the European Union. Experts consider the pro-immigration policies of France and Germany as a direct cause of the crisis. A referendum is binding if more than half of those eligible to vote participate. Poland has held 5 referendums since 1989. 2 of them were binding on the adoption of the Constitution, held in 1997, and on the entry to the European Union, held in 2003. The threat is enormous to the Polish nation: ethnic, cultural, civilizational, internal security changes. The date of the referendum is not yet known, but there are opinions that it could be held on the same day as the parliamentary elections. Since the beginning of the Russian aggression, more than 12 million refugees from Ukraine have crossed the Polish border, of which 1.5 million remain. To help refugees, Poland per capita received 200 euros from the European Union budget. Friday is the last day of the current session of the Polish Parliament. In the morning, deputies held the second reading of the presidential draft amendment to the law on the Commission to investigate Russian influence. It may still be adopted today. The draft assumes, among other things, that parliamentarians will not be allowed to sit on the Commission and that appeals will be possible to the Court of Appeals. The Sejm held a debate on the draft amendment to the law on the Commission to investigate Russian influence. It is a proposal authored by President Andrzej Duda. Better late than never. Let's start and stop with political slurring of opponents about being Russian agents, because Poles want to live peacefully and prosperously in Poland without Russian and German influence. The prosecutor's office investigates criminal things, and here we are talking about the fact that in the majesty of the law, a person who has power can make fatal decisions, and citizens before the elections have the right to find out. You wangle, you manipulate, you are awful. Thank you. We are talking about the president's amendment, which faces the opposition, those arguments you have discussed in the past few weeks, and today it is a big check. On May 29th, the Polish president signed into law a bill allowing the establishment of a commission to investigate Russian influence. Following a wave of opposition, the president proposed amendments to the law. Among other things, they stipulate that parliamentarians will not sit on the commission and that appeals against the commission's decisions are to be referred to the Court of Appeals in Warsaw. Above all, the issue of abolishing the remedies, primarily the one that spoke of a ban on holding functions related to the disposal of public funds. During work on the amendment in the Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs, several amendments were adopted. Among them, a clause was removed, stating that the first report on the committee's work will be published on September 17th. Approval by the Senate will probably take a long time. This could mean that the committee will not be formed until August. The activities of state institutions from 2007 to 2022 will be put under the magnifying glass of the Commission's experts. They will concern, among other things, the policies and actions of the POPSL government. Prime Minister Donald Tusk at the time sought political and economic reconciliation with Germany and Russia. They pursued a policy of reset, the one that the Germans pursued, as a result of which it will be difficult for them to defend themselves. The backstage of the pro-Russian policy of Donald Tusk's government is shown in the documentary series Reset. The first episode reveals that the contents of the thesis prepared for the former head of the foreign ministry, Radosław Sikorski, for his meeting with Sergei Lavrov in 2008. Representatives of the POPSL government portrayed Russia as a strategic partner. Among other things, the memo referred to the times when Poland was under Russian annexation. To boast or to invoke the legacy of the partition, the basis for the regulation of Polish-Russian relations based on the partition and on the partitioners? Well, what does this man have in his head? According to representatives of the president's office, the commission should be formed as soon as possible, because across our eastern border, the Russian Federation is waging a full-scale war. Similar commissions have already been established in other European Union countries. Anti-aircraft alarms sounded across Ukraine today. The shelling included Kherson, where 23 people were wounded, including 3 children. Meanwhile, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa arrived in Kiev with a delegation of African leaders as part of a peacekeeping mission to end the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Today, Ukraine became the target of another Russian missile attack. Air defenses shot down 6 Kinzhal ballistic missiles, 6 Caliber cruise missiles, and 2 Russian reconnaissance drones. Several people were wounded in the Kiev region. The attack occurred during the African delegation's visit to Ukraine. The African leaders began their trip to Ukraine with a visit to Bucha, a city near Kiev where Russian occupiers carried out executions, rape, and torture, and where international investigators have collected ample evidence of war crimes. Now we are fighting for our independence. We are losing our people, our soldiers who protect and liberate our land. Here in Bucha, our civilians, peaceful citizens, were killed for refusing to obey the aggressor. Our guests from Africa learned the truth today, and that's very important. The African delegation met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today and will hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg tomorrow. The leaders of South Africa, Senegal, Zambia, Comoros, and Egypt want to propose peace on the basis of confidence building, according to a previously prepared document. Putin builds confidence by launching the largest missile attack on Kiev in weeks, exactly amid the visit of African leaders to our capital. Russian missiles are a message to Africa. Russia wants more war, not peace. The proposal put forward by the African leaders includes the withdrawal of Russian troops, the removal of Russian tactical nuclear weapons from Belarus, the suspension of the execution of Putin's International Criminal Court arrest warrant, and the easing of Western sanctions on Russia. Kiev says the basis for any settlement of the war must be the unconditional withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian lands. Earlier today, NATO defense ministers met in Brussels for a second day of talks to prepare the upcoming Vilnius summit of leaders, which will discuss support for Ukraine and security guarantees. Opening the meeting, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he expected leaders to discuss boosting ammunition supplies from industry and a commitment to higher defense spending. They are also set to discuss how best to assure Ukraine's security until it can join the military alliance, according to U.S. and European officials.
Today, we will prepare the ground for the NATO summit in Vilnius, where leaders will take decisions to further strengthen our deterrence and defense. We will review our updated plans for the defense of Europe. We will take steps to ensure our industrial base can meet higher demand, and we will develop a new, more ambitious defense investment pledge, which I expect will set 2% of GDP as a minimum to invest in defense.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.